Chapter 4 Sticky Notes, Species Interactions, and Community Ecology. The case study is about the zebra mussels that invaded the Great Lakes. There's also quagga mussels that are around here that are invasive species. So the zebra mussels came through ships that came to the Great Lakes. So there's a way to get to the Great Lakes from the ocean. And the down here in the reading, it talked about that they came from Western Asia, Eastern Europe, and they arrived on the ships, which brought the larvae. And then little boats. So up here, people go fishing in the Great Lakes, and then they drag their fishing boat to other little lakes around the United States. And slowly but surely, they spread all over the United States. So this case study also talks about phytoplankton and zooplankton. Make sure you know what those are because we'll be talking about those things this year as well. Turn the page. So on page 76, up at the top, it does talk about the problems. So these are the problems with the zebra mussels. They're invasive species, and they starve and outcompete the native mussels that live in the Great Lakes. They also, the intake pipes for water treatment, they clog them, and so cities around the Great Lakes have to spend millions of dollars unclogging the pipes. The next invasive mussel is called quagga, and that's the one that we have around here in Santa Clarita, and Lake Piru has them now. Some of the other lakes so far are quagga free, but if you have a boat, you have to get it inspected and you have to clean, drain, and dry your boat to prevent them. Okay, down here on page 76 starts talking about competition. So know the difference between intra and inter-specific competition. On page 77, make sure that you understand that competition can lead to endangerment or extinction, especially competition with other species. This is a natural process, so extinction is natural, but it can be sped up through human intervention. So invasive species can speed up this, habitat loss can speed this up, but competition does cause endangerment or extinction. Up here, you have competitive exclusion. So if a species' range of tolerance is in here, the things that they can eat or where they can live or the salinity levels in the ocean or the flow rate of the stream or whatever that range of tolerance is, because of competition, it's usually limited to a what's called a realized niche. So know these terms on this page. Down here, this is an example of resource partitioning. It avoids direct competition. So these birds all eat bugs in trees, but they have adapted, so they're kind of looking for different bugs in different parts of the trees, and so they avoid direct competition, which actually reduces the amount of energy that they need to use, which is a good thing. Turning the page. At the top of page 79 is about predator-prey interactions. So here we have this figure and caption. So this shows that predators and preys follow each other cyclically. And so we have this data of lynx, which are kind of like bobcats, but they're up north. So down in Santa Clarita, we have bobcats. And then further north, like in Canada or the northern United States, they have lynx. They're very similar species, but they hunt and eat rabbits, hares. And when the lynx population increases, the rabbit population increases, and vice versa. When there's more bunnies to eat, then the lynx make more babies because there's more nutrition. So bodies kind of work like that. They will make more babies when they have more food and nutrition. And so they follow each other. The same thing with the bunnies. When there's more rain and more grass to eat or other plants, they're going to make more babies too. And then there's more rabbits to eat, so now the lynx are going to make more babies. So this is a cyclical pattern of predator and prey. More of one makes more of the other. The definition of predation is to hunt, kill, and eat, whereas parasitism does not kill their host right away. So a parasite is like a tapeworm in a human body, or even a fungus that grows, or the flu virus. So the flu virus, when we have it, it makes us sick, it drains our energy, but it wants to make lots of copies of itself before your body fights and kills it off, or before it kills you. So a parasite doesn't immediately want to kill its host because then it's lost its food source. So it wants to eat and feed on its source and then make a bunch of copies of itself, so reproduction, and then the host can die or can continue to live in the host. It doesn't always feed on. Some parasitic plants, like ivy, will climb on top of other plants to reach the sun, but these vines then smother like the tree. So they'll vine up the tree, reach the sun for photosynthesis, but then they end up blocking the sun for that tree, and that tree could end up dying due to the lack of energy from photosynthesis. So it doesn't necessarily have to eat or feed on, but it can use that species for another purpose. So down here are some ways to avoid predation. And so you have some adaptations. You have camouflage, which we call crypsis. So down here, the official name is crypsis. We have warning coloration, like don't eat me, I'm bad. And this one is mimicry. So this caterpillar looks like a snake, but it's not. So it's mimicking something that is more harmful. Butterflies do this as well. The non-poisonous butterflies will mimic those, so their colorations look similar. And they do this through natural selection over time. Over here you have a parasite, sea lampreys. They're just sucking blood out of this fish. So that's an example of a parasite. A good example of a parasite that's actually beneficial to humans is a parasitoid wasp. So we actually can release these in our crops that will go in and eat the bad bugs that would eat the crop. So parasitoid wasps, they're carnivores, so they're not going to eat the crops, but they'll eat the bugs that are eating the crops. So we actually use them as a form of organic pest control. Turn the page to page 80. Know the definition of symbiosis. So these are species that work together. Some have mutual benefits. So bees and flowers, the bees get nectar, the flowers get pollination. In our gut, we have all kinds of bacteria and microbes. Microbes are microorganisms, so can only be seen under the microscope. They help us digest our food and they get energy. So we actually need a ton of different kinds of microbes in our bodies that help us. And then in coral reefs, coral is actually a plant, it's an animal. So coral is an animal, it's related to anemones, but it needs the algae that lives with it to photosynthesize. So the algae photosynthesizes and it gets a home. The coral uses that energy, so they help each other. And then commensalism is one benefits and the other has no effect. So like on Finding Nemo, the clownfish gets protection. The anemone doesn't get any benefit from the clownfish, but it doesn't get harmed either. And so that's commensalism. Okay, over here on page 81, so here's an example of a food chain and sort of a food web. So you go from producers to primary consumers, secondary consumers, tertiary consumers. But then when things die, they're either decomposed by detritivores or decomposers. So a detritivore is an animal that decomposes, and a regular decomposer is a microorganism like bacteria, mold, fungus, things like that. So know all the figures and terms for this whole figure, the producers, primary consumers, etc., know the definition of a trophic level, which is a feeding level. So this has 1, 2, 3, 4 trophic levels. And then know that a detritivore is sometimes called a detritus feeder because detritus means dead particles. And so they're animals that decompose and they eat detritus, which are dead organisms. Plant matter or dead animal matter. So when we're talking about trophic levels, now this is a review from biology class, but a trophic level contains about 10% of the energy below it. So we say it's lost, but it's not really lost because it is transferred as heat. So basically that's why organisms feel hot. Well, animals feel hot because they're losing that energy as heat. So when you eat food, you digest it, and that energy is in the form of calories, but then it's also released as heat through your metabolism, through cellular respiration. And so as you go up the food chain, we can sometimes refer to it as an energy pyramid, which has a picture down here. And you lose 90% of that energy is heat as you go up a trophic level. So again, heat is never lost. It's just transformed to different forms. And so heat is unusable as food. So it's unusable to the ecosystem. And that's why we say it's lost, because it's lost in its usefulness, but it's really just transferred as heat. And so down here, if you have 1,000 calories of grass or the grass makes 1,000 calories from the sun, only 100 of it is available for the grasshopper to eat, and only 10 of that's available for the gopher to eat, and then the hawk, only 1 of that original is available. So you can see 90% loss. Over here on page 83, notice figure and caption of the food web. Know on a food web that arrows flow toward the predator. Now, the official way of saying this is that it shows how energy is flowing. On an AP test, if you're asked, which way do the arrows go, you need to say it's how energy is flowing. So energy is flowing from the oak tree to the deer. It's flowing from the spider to the toad. So energy is flowing there. It points to the predator. But on the AP test, you need to be more scientific. Don't just say, well, the arrow points to the predator. You need to say it indicates the direction of energy flow, and that shows you understand it more than it just shows what eats what. All right, on page 84, we have keystone species. Read this excerpt. This is about how sea otters are essential to the health of the kelp forest because they eat urchins, which eat the kelp. And so if the sea otters are gone, then the urchins take over and they destroy the kelp, which you can see here. Another example is wolves in Yellowstone. When the wolves are gone, then the elk, which are kind of like big deer, they overgraze, and then all of the vegetation becomes very unhealthy, and then the rivers start becoming unhealthy too. And we'll talk more about that in class and watch little videos. A thing that's not in your book that you need to know is about indicator species. So there's some species, like even a sea otter is a keystone, but it also can indicate the health of the kelp forest as well by its presence. Okay, so if certain species are present or absent, or they're abundant or scarce, it shows the health of that ecosystem. So it could be healthy or unhealthy depending on certain species. Birds are a real good example. Birds are a good indicator species because when they're in an ecosystem,